very grateful for this opportunity. I don't think I fully deserve it, but I'll try to be up to the challenge. And I was given an opportunity to present some of the recent findings on the one hand, but at the same time, I took the liberty of looking at the last 10 years or something of some of the teacher training projects that I have conducted. And I would like to talk a little bit about teacher development, electronic teacher development, electronic continued professional development, as we call it, in the social media era, characterizing a few environments, starting with MOOCs and finishing with virtual practicum. If we think about the challenges for language teachers nowadays, of course, apart from the very last point, which was added due to the current situation that we are having, that is to emergency remote teaching and learning. So apart, of course, from this very urgent and very painful need to incorporate technology-mediated methodology into daily practice, we have seen, of course, a great opening of language classrooms and increasing multiculturality due to a number of reasons: student mobility, exchange, migrants, job openings abroad. At the same time, of course, some negative influences were also connected with those openings, which also language teachers, especially English language teachers, had to face. Attitudes towards English, the question of standards, the changing role of English or Englishes, the inequality of access, the conflicting attitudes, as I said, or even the McDonaldization of language methodology, that is some kind of uniformization mainly exercised by the course book, by the examinations, by the assessment standards. So if we think slightly more broadly about teacher skills, language teacher skills, of course, the traditional model is what you see at the top. That is interactive skills, the ability to interact with learners, to manage groups, to organize learning. Pedagogical skills, the skills of dealing with learners across different age groups, especially children, very young children, teenagers, young adults, who are all, of course, difficult in some way. They might be difficult groups to teach or demanding groups to teach. Linguistic skills, the fluency in the target language, the accuracy, the range of grammar and vocabulary, and of course, didactic skills, the practical use of methodology for content presentation, content assessment. But apart from these four areas, traditionally regarded as essential, the current situation shows to us that two more points are very badly needed, two more points that are not so frequently covered in teacher training curricula. On the one hand, techno-pedagogical literacy. We are all familiar with the TPAC concept, which puts it quite nicely into practice. As well as interculturality, but interculturality not in the sense of intercultural communication, which is quite frequently covered, or intercultural, or the knowledge of cultures in general, but rather intercultural teaching awareness or intercultural teaching sensitiveness, or what some authors call cultural pedagogical sensitivity. That is the ability to respond to different cultures, the ability to adapt to different environments, to different social expectations as far as learning and teaching is concerned, something that is becoming more and more important, even in such countries as Poland, which are relatively homogeneous, where we used to train student teachers of Polish origin by trainers being of Polish origin as well, how to deliver English language instruction to students of Polish origin as well. So of course, this traditional setup, this traditional monolingual setup is, of course, changing quite a lot. And one important thing that teacher trainees need to notice is this ability to see that L2 learning is a challenge for learners to go beyond the comfort zone, to move into this third space, which we know quite well as the concept promoted by Claire Cramsch, for instance. And this, of course, does not only mean the new culture, but also the new ways of learning. So the concept of cultures of learning, that is certain expectations, attitudes, values, and beliefs about how language skills should be taught, what forms of interaction are appropriate, are socially accepted in particular cultures, is gaining more and more importance in this respect. So this, of course, means that we need to look for ways to sensitize teacher trainees in those different countries that we come from to this phenomenon, to the need to develop cultural sensitivity, to develop this kind of ability to adapt methodologies to fit the social expectations that we can face in a particular context, the ability to adapt to the context, to the local ecology of learning. And this is, of course, where electronic continued professional development, e-CPD, comes in very useful. This is a highly flexible and dynamic area, which is about using new tools to open new instructional areas. Most importantly, creating conditions for acquisition of professional skills in new contexts, more challenging contexts, perhaps in more enriching contexts, especially if this is the case with massive scale in massive open online courses, MOOCs, then electronic professional development can make a significant contribution to teacher development, perhaps on a par with traditional university teacher training programs, or perhaps even much greater in some respects. Also because in e-CPD, we usually see quite a lot of bottom-up aspect of training, rather than traditional top-down delivery from the trainer as the knower, as the sage, to the trainees as the people who need to be filled with knowledge, just like empty containers to be filled with liquid. In modern environments, e-CPD environments, we see much greater content generation from the bottom to the top. People sharing, people co-construing knowledge, people collaborating on specific products that leads to generalizations that can be, should be grasped by trainers and put into good use. Let me now, in the second part of my talk, characterize 4 major environments that I have selected for you for today. Of course, we could talk about many more e-CPD contexts, e-CPD environments. I have selected 4 that are most probably most interesting or most beneficial with greatest potential. I'm sure quite a lot of us are familiar with massive open online courses, with MOOCs, environments that accommodate huge, sometimes really huge numbers of participants from around the world, regardless of their background in terms of economy, education, and culture, that generally do not restrict access, and they can be enrolled in on the same basis, with learning delivered through different ways, through different means, video lectures, handouts, reading articles, according to schedules, syllabi, with course facilitators, achievement standards, and participants, that can be used as an alternative to professional training programs that could also be quite nicely incorporated in regular training programs, for instance, as a part of the face-to-face teacher training curriculum. The reasons why MOOCs could be used in e-CPD are of course multifold, observing how others teach online, share ideas, e-live, that is a new term, e-live the student experience in the online fashion, share resources, well-chosen resources, well-adapted resources on a topic or subtopic. However, if we think about MOOCs, of course, we need to be aware of the fact that many of them stay in this so-called ex-MOOC fashion or ex-MOOC model, which replicates traditional university teaching with the trainer to trainee top-down delivery. Some of them even replicate or even go a step backwards, we could say, called quasi-MOOCs that provide not much more than resources, web-based materials as open educational resources with certain learning tasks specified, however, with no or little social interaction or grading. And the format that, of course, we appreciate most and we would like to see most frequently used is the CMOOC, that is community building and sharing in a decentralized fashion that best embodies those principles I was talking about, the principles of content generation going bottom up, with teachers as professionals sharing problems, trying to find solutions, while trainers looking from the top at these problems and trying to make generalizations on the basis of them. Of course, MOOCs have their problems, and we need to be aware of them. Certain institutional issues, validation, accreditation, quality and assurance, learner issues, dropout, participation, engagement, motivation, personal, cognitive, and psychological barriers, pedagogical issues. I talked about the three models, and of course, the question of how content is delivered. The very phrase that I used, content is delivered, already indicates a certain preference. As you can see, even I continue thinking in this kind of traditional model of top-down delivery. And of course, technological issues, the question of instructional designs, technologies used, availability of those technologies, assessment, learning analytics, etc. Just two examples from yesterday from Coursera. If you haven't taken any MOOC yourself, most probably they could be quite a nice start. It's especially interesting to see this massive scale that when added to this kind of common denominator, the common problem or the common issues, creates really a hugely divergent dialogue that is quite useful for opening the horizons, opening enlarging the skills and the awareness of the professionals. If we think about professional development, of course, reflection is primary. And nowadays, with relatively easy video sharing and video recording and video editing opportunities, putting aside, of course, data protection, which is not that easy, video-mediated teacher reflection with digital video proves to be an interesting means of facilitating critical reflection and encouraging self-evaluation, especially that this is how we can capture the immediacy of the class, expose the complexity of the learning process, and to bridge this kind of traditional theory-practice divide. Obviously, classroom video serves as a platform for mutual understanding, enabling teachers to reflect upon the same concepts and upon the same events, but also to develop a discourse for analyzing video. So the very video analysis and video discussion opens up teachers because they need to start using the meta language used to discuss whatever was happening in the extracts that they saw. And of course, we know very well from the findings of linguistics, from Sapir-Whorf hypothesis and others, that it is thanks to the ability to express what we want to say that we actually perceive certain phenomena. So of course, in this sense, video-based discussions, expanding meta-language, help also increase this multicultural teaching awareness. Again, if I am to recommend a sample for you to think about and have a look at, Shaping the Way We Teach English is a marvelous resource for use by teacher trainers as the starting point for this video-mediated discussion with as a 14-module teacher training video series, with each module featuring video extracts shot in multiple countries outside Europe and mainly in Asia, Southeast Asia, which together with teacher trainers' explanations, guidelines, and recommendations in a variety of topics that you can see on the slide, gives really food for thought, and especially when confronted with locally collected experiences from locally completed teaching practice or practicum, this confrontation could be a highly useful experience for teacher trainees. One interesting concept that you can also explore, recently proposed by Sun 2014, was YouTube micro-teaching, where recording micro-teaching, here it was a second language writing instruction, second language writing course, where micro-teaching was recorded, uploaded onto YouTube, and discussions were directed guided by the teacher, by the instructor, but also grew from the bottom, let's say that is from the trainees. So this is an interesting idea, of course, to see how first of all, people prepare materials for upload and how they what they actually want to share. This is pretty much like the idea of learner portfolio, teacher portfolio, whatever is it that a teacher trainee wants to share. And the second important point is how we see discussion, how we see reflection actually arising, emerging through discussion. The third environment, teacher training environment, I would like to summarize is virtual reality. Virtual reality, of course, has been with us for some 20 years almost now. I remember first explorations of active worlds, the predecessor of Second Life, something in 2003, 2004. Of course, we saw this huge frenzy with Second Life around 2005, 2007. I think this pretty much the fascination of Second Life kind of faded away around 2010. And those last 10 years, I don't really think that we have seen that much of exploration of Second Life, but for, of course, those who see that as a useful alternative, but for those ardent supporters. And of course, 3D virtual worlds proved to be highly useful, especially as far as providing opportunities for interaction, for realistic immersion in the worlds, real life locations with a theme specific place, a country, thus creating learning spaces that would not be as artificial and as contrived as a traditional classroom is as a communicative space. And at the same time, of course, immersing learning in this kind of real life, simulated life context. I know it's hard to bridge those two things. They look like opposites, simulated and real life. But that's most probably what we need to think about. In the recent years, we have seen the development of virtual reality technology together with great progress in head-mounted devices, head-mounted virtual reality devices, as well as the software, software environments that would enable much finer manipulation of avatars. And two such very interesting studies into virtual reality in teacher training are summarized on this slide. If you don't know immersion, you can go for immersion on YouTube. This is one of the links, one of the videos that introduces immersion students, that is avatar students with certain, let's say, human characteristics. But what was interesting in Kamhi Stein and others 2020 study was that immersion virtual reality environment was programmed by the teacher trainer so that students performed certain roles at different levels of intensity, pleasant or compliant, non-compliant, agitated or upset, throughout a part of the whole of the lesson. And of course, the teacher trainee who had to deal with those immersion avatars programmed to follow those certain feelings, to exhibit those feelings, did not know who was programmed how and for how long. And of course, it was an interesting study showing how we could possibly learn to cope with certain kinds of emotions in students in a simulated environment. Another interesting study, Savrulia et al. And others, 2018, where virtual reality enabled the user teacher, the teacher trainee, to view a certain classroom phenomenon. Here it was verbal bullying in a multicultural school classroom environment from the two perspectives, the perspective of the teacher and the perspective of the bullied student. This, of course, needs head-mounted devices. This, of course, needs the software environment, but this also needs scenario and dialogues that were the same at both perspectives, but what differed was camera position and those two viewpoints that, together with the pre-programming of the student avatars, led to the enhancement of teaching skills, most probably because the technology has become cheaper and more accessible nowadays. We will see more and more such studies, similarly to what is happening, for instance, in medical training, where so much of professional skills, so many professional skills are actually practiced in such simulated environments. The last environment, or the last approach I would like to talk about, and the one in which I situated quite a few of my studies over the last 10 years, was telecollaboration. And telecollaboration, again, has been with us for some almost 20 years right now. For the last 10 years, it has gained quite a huge scale, together with a number of EU-funded projects by the team led by Robert O'Dowd, Helm, Guth, Miller, Hartmann, Kurek, and a couple of other people. And of course, we see telecollaboration in teacher training as useful for a number of reasons that you see on the slide: linguistic competence, cultural awareness, digital literacy, intercultural competence. But what's most interesting for me as a teacher trainer is knowledge co-construal in teacher awareness raising, in raising the awareness of multicultural aspects of language teaching methodology. Of course, we can experiment with telecollaboration, thinking about duration, design, the level of or degree of teacher presence, the amount of learner autonomy or teacher control. with the kinds of reflection modes or assessment modes. So that these are different variables that we can manipulate with designing telecollaborative teacher training projects. And some of these were actually, yes, and what's perhaps most important is the design, the task design. What you see is a set of tasks prepared by the Intent project team, 2012, one of those EU-funded projects, well developed, well exemplified, and well validated telecollaborative tasks that, of course, could be joined into task sequences so that trainees move from lower to higher levels of Bloom's taxonomy, from exchange information through comparing, contrasting to collaboration knowledge co-construal. And a few projects that I have conducted with my teacher trainees over the last 8 years or something were focused on exploring those different dimensions. Telecollaboration in order to extend the practicum, in order to ensure post-practicum reflection, which unfortunately rarely is implemented in the face-to-face university classroom for reasons of limited time. Another interesting project, this time on purpose, made asynchronous, asymmetrical exchange, that is teacher trainees, inexperienced as teachers, but well-skilled in technopedagogical literacy, teamed up with ESP teachers from Slovenia, very well trained in ESP methodology, but rather limited in the technopedagogical literacy. So digital materials development for English for specific purposes here was accomplished by those project groups in this kind of purposefully created asymmetrical relationship, competence gap, as we can call it. Another project, another idea, again, exploring a different setup. We generally tend to think about telecollaboration as the perfect match setting. That is, we have the same number of students on both sides. They differ as little as possible. The only thing that mainly differentiates them is the culture, but we try to make them as identical as possible in order to facilitate that. Here we explored a different concept. The teacher trainees came from the same country, Poland. Poland in a face-to-face class, and Polish teacher trainees in distant places of the world, serving the practicum, Comenius or ISEC practicum abroad in different countries, where this asymmetrical relationship was pretty much in the model of so-called electronic appearances or online appearances, with remote teachers presenting or sending their problems, and the class exploring those problems for a couple of weeks, presenting solutions and offering those solutions. One study, one particularly useful and I would say, I think I may say that successful study, was the one that I conducted with the class of our wonderful host today, Professor Ferit, where we actually tried to find this kind of perfect match, and we wanted to see to what extent those partner groups can actually be almost identical in terms of the class taught language testing, in terms of the methodology used, the training methodology, communicative social constructivist methodology, in terms of the syllabus, in terms of assignments. However, responding to different contexts. Turkish students adapting, responding to Polish students' tests, imitating Matura, that is secondary school leaving exam. Polish students adapting, responding, evaluating Turkish students' tests that were imitating Turkish secondary school leaving exam. And the final project, 2019, this time, again, coming back to this concept of competence gap and also asymmetrical in terms of numbers of students, groups of students from Poland, slightly more experienced graduate students, providing solutions or help or ideas and developing classroom materials in response to certain problems, weekly challenges, as we called them, showed by the Turkish partner. And in this particular exchange, we saw how important it is for a collaborative exchange to be well structured, well designed, for a task sequence to be organized, created in such a way that tasks gradually grow in complexity, starting with lower levels of Bloom's taxonomy, information exchange, just as you can see, proceeding through comparing and contrasting, responding, giving options, giving alternatives, finally to collaborating and co-construing knowledge. I have to admit that, frankly, that this level is not really the one that we got to, mainly because the Turkish students finished their academic year pretty much 2 months earlier than the Polish students. But that, of course, happens, and sometimes it's really hard to deal with such practicalities. So if I am to conclude, I strongly believe that pretty much all of these environments presented today would very usefully add to this techno-pedagogical literacy, intercultural teaching awareness by opening teacher trainees to the problems, to the practical reality of language classrooms visible or existing somewhere else. Especially that this is how we can increase sensitivity to local cultures of learning, to socially accepted ways of materials delivery, classroom organization, but also language assessment. In particular, I explored the collaborative exchange, just as I said, and here the clear findings are that it's necessary to have face-to-face class time to stimulate reflection and provide support. It's essential to adapt to the local teacher training culture with the amount of guidance, support, control, also to prepare students for this kind of local learning culture, the approach to deadlines, for instance, the delay in communication, or the instant communication or delayed communication, which again is a characteristic feature of different cultures, to try to deal with practicalities, timetables, and deadlines, although usually these are some things that you have to live with and you rather adapt to them than do much about them. And of course, think about flexibility in terms of forms and degrees of involvement for the partners. The partners in different countries will not necessarily be as eager and as readily involved in the exchange as you think you are. Definitely, even though we might all think about telecollaborative exchanges as the model in which people on both sides do the same, this does not actually have to be the case, and sometimes it's better to think about those asymmetrical setups so that they are successful because, for instance, the people on one part could contribute less information, could contribute less data, than to try to do much more and fail. So of course, proper care put into designing, running, and evaluating such activities, in particular, task design, well tried, tested, evaluated, validated task sequences, and of course, a perfect partner and engaging tasks. So let me thank you for that. My great thanks to the organizers for having me here. I hope I did not exceed the time that I was given. And of course, I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you very much.
So thank you, Professor, for this great presentation and for the inspiring ideas. Okay, so during your presentation, I have noted down the questions as far as I could. Let me check. I think we can start with the questions, right? This is from Samira, and sorry for my pronunciation, by the way, for the names. Samira, I think. Samira asks this question: what are some of the most effective techniques to assess learners' performance in the different language skills or content subjects online?
Okay, that's a good question, Samira. Not necessarily very closely related to my talk, but of course, as a teacher trainer, as a teacher, as a parent, in all of these roles, I encounter, of course, the question of assessment. In fact, thank you for asking me. Writing a new book about language assessment across socio-cultural contexts. So this is, of course, a very interesting topic. And if we think about techniques to assess learners' performance online, then of course the question arises: which technologies are established, which technologies are socially accepted in some contexts, in some schools, in some countries. We see that in Poland, for instance, there may be clear preferences for certain technologies, for certain platforms, even discouragement of some other platforms. This is, for instance, what we clearly see in university teaching, where it is not really a question of what assessment tools we would like to use, but rather which we are allowed to use by the university because of data protection regulations, because of some other issues that are pretty much above us as instructors. But most probably, if you think about the practical teacher's reality, then of course, given the current situation, it's useful to think about more informal ways of assessment, alternative ways of assessment. Think about electronic digital portfolio that would be some kind of reflection of what we know portfolio as an assessment tool, but not really a collection of digital artifacts, digital works of students only, but rather their involvement, their engagement in selection, evaluation, replacement, in order to see the progress. So if I were to be a teacher at this particular moment, I think I would not try to imitate the traditional ways, the traditional tests, because the current situation, the online, this kind of remote emergency, remote teaching, I think it does not really allow us to do that. And I would try to look for alternative ways, portfolio-based ways, for different forms of alternative assessment, because these are pretty much justified by this kind of emergency situation. And it's always useful to try to do something new, so that once we go back to the traditional face-to-face reality, those things, those tools will simply stay with us.
Okay. Thank you so much, Professor, for this answer. But so I would like to ask the participants, that is, if they want to ask their own questions, yes, so we can, turn on their webcams and microphones and they can ask the question. So therefore, I would like to ask Sedat Hocam to ask the question if he agrees to do so. Just a second, please. I need to, because it's a very interesting question, by the way. Okay. Sedat Hocam, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. So.
By the way, thank you very much for this great presentation. And it was really helpful to see what's going on in the field of computer-assisted language learning and ICT integration. And for the telecollaboration studies, we are also conducting this kind of studies with my students and with the students in the United States. And we saw that if we use some tasks and at the surface level, for example, in many telecollaboration studies, the participants talk about their festivals, their music, their clothes, or they are at the really at the surface level. But when you add some topics like gender discrimination, transsexuality, for example, the attitudes towards these people, and also religion, and they really question their own culture, they really want to see the differences, and it really helps to develop intercultural communicative competence of the learners. We can say, I can say that. And that was actually rather than a question, it is just an opinion about these topics, and that was all. Thank you very much, by the way, Ferit Hocam, for organizing this, and thank you for this great presentation again.
Ferit Hoca, if I may respond. Thank you, Sedat Hoca, for this comment. In fact, those teacher training projects that we did, and especially the one that we did with Ferit Hoca, the language testing project actually showed this. When we started at the level of information exchange, things were relatively smooth and easy. But when we got to the higher conceptual level of evaluation of tests, and in particular adaptation to a different culture, then it started to be really challenging for student teachers on both parts, but at the same time also eye-opening, especially when they see the clash between the expected methodology, what we see in terms of expected approach to language teaching and assessment, and the practical reality. One particularly striking comment that I remember was that those teacher trainees said that they knew that we have to do this or that, but at the same time they knew they mustn't do it, because when they go to schools and they apply those ideas, they will be viewed as bad teachers. They will be viewed as those, let's say, didactic behaviors will be unacceptable socially. And that was also some kind of sad conclusion, yes? Most probably disrupting some kind of identity that you develop as a Polish teacher trainee, as a Turkish teacher trainee. And this kind of telecollaboration, especially when we, just as I said, take it to the higher level in Bloom's taxonomy, can actually lead to this kind of disruption of identity. So thanks for that.
Okay, so can I add something, Sedat Hocam and Professor Krajka, about this? You know, sometimes we need to be careful.
I am Jarek Hoca. If you're Ferit Hoca and Sedat Hoca, I am Jarek Hoca.
Okay, Jarek Hoca. So I would like to, add something. Sometimes, we cannot, touch upon those sensitive topics, So it's not something that, we didn't want, but, even, sometimes at the universities, there are some, topics that you cannot, discuss or analyze. And even in the reading classes, I remember, the very old days when we were talking about the, pictures about mythology and etc. Even there were some discussions about those things. So therefore, yes, and actually, as you said, Sedat Hocam, I think so. It would be great, to talk about those topics, because those topics, actually, those very sensitive topics, if we can, if be objective about those topics, and if we can know our culture, what people think and what the others are doing, etc. And in this way, we can be tolerant. Otherwise, when we say culture, yes, most of the time students and people just think that, the food, the way we dress, etc. But what about the other topics, as you said? So they are very important, but sometimes we cannot do that, honestly speaking.
Actually, one of the findings of our study, for example, our students were in Turkey, as you know, and they are Muslim students, and their partners are in the United States. And in Turkey, they thought that American youth, they are they have more freedom. And the Americans, the American partners thought that they are Muslim students, so they are quite conservative. But the results were completely opposite, because in our partners in the United States were from Texas, and it was quite conservative. They really focus on their religion. They really care about their parents. For example, if their parents do not allow them, they cannot marry. And these topics were really strict. And in Turkey, for example, they say that you have to pray 5 times a day. Is that right? And many of my students said that actually it was a must, but it's not the case here. So they started to question their religions, and also they started to question their stereotypes. And it was from that perspective, it was quite interesting. And also we published that article. It was that.
Okay, thank you so much. And another question, not directly related to Yarek Hoca's presentation, but again, so this is from, again, sorry for my pronunciation, Arpita. I'm not sure about how it's pronounced, but I think it's Arpita. Arpita asks this question, as an English teacher, how can we evaluate or improve the reading skills of the students online? That is, so how can we improve reading during online classes? Or I think that would be a nice topic for reading classes, talking about these sensitive topics. Yarek Hoca, what can you say about this? Improving reading online or practicing?
That's, of course, an interesting question, Arpita, because on the one hand, we can really think about technology helping and technology assisting, especially if we think about some tools that provide instant lookup of texts. I think Ferit Hoca used to review such tools for improving readability, to add this kind of instant lookup, not really the word-for-word translation, but the possibility of lookup of words that you might not know. So on the one hand, of course, we can explore such ideas and such concepts. And of course, we can try to find technology to help, but at the same time, we see Arpita and all the others, especially if you experience the same as we do, how much learning has transferred right now to the electronic mode. And perhaps it would be useful to go back, at least with some activities, to the traditional mode and the traditional ways of reading and the traditional skills, which people are actually losing so much because of being locked up with screens, computer screens only. So I would really try to find some balance. On the one hand, of course, reading online, if it can be assisted by some nice tools such as those programs that enable us to connect text to the online dictionaries to get this online lookup. That, of course, would be useful. But at the same time, I would, I think, reduce the amount of reading online for health reasons. And I would perhaps try to go back to those traditional skills. Sorry, Arpita, most probably this is not the answer you expected, but I think we should also try to find some balance and use technology where it can really bring this kind of added value, but not really use it at all costs. I think I would say I would think like that.
Okay, so thank you so much for your answer, Jarek Hoca. And I also shared the Journal of Teaching English with Technology, the journal name and the link, of course, for discussions, around teaching language skills, grammar, vocabulary, etc., online and using technology. I think the journal is a great place, for different answers to your questions on your mind regarding how we can benefit from technology and other online tools. Thank you so much. So, Joanna, do you have any other questions that I might have missed?
Yes.
I've checked the so.
Yes, thank you very much. I would like to thank you, Jarek, once again for accepting our invitation. It was great and inspiring. And also thank you for sharing all those examples, practical examples. My thought is, it's more like a thought, maybe question as well. Do you think that the problems with, getting into this higher level of Bloom's taxonomy is sometimes also connected with intercultural differences, especially in perception of criticism, of constructive criticism? What I mean, I have, for example, experience in Polish-German telecollaboration, and it was a huge problem because, Germans are very direct in their criticism in comparison to Polish students. And we observed that our Polish students, they're trying to, beating about around the bush. So it was like a huge problem. And well, finally, we tried to talk about it, but generally, the success of telecollaboration is not only, teacher, of course, but also establishing some clear rules, some clear procedures. What do you think about it?
Yes, absolutely, Joanna. Would it be also okay to add Oja to a woman?
Yeah, fine, no problem. Yes.
Yeah, okay, Joanna Oja.
No problem. Yeah.
That's of course an interesting issue, interesting topic. By the way, for those of you who don't know what Oja is, I learned this when I was teaching in Turkey, and that was really an intercultural experience for me on starting answering your question, how Turkish students talk to their instructors, showing great respect by taking the first name and adding the Oja and not the family name. In Poland, that would be obviously rude and offensive if you use the first name instead of the family name. And here, I guess this is pretty okay. Am I right, Farid?
Yeah, yes. That's fine,
yes.
No problem with that.
Yeah, so Joanna, that's absolutely crucial. Mutual understanding, and leveling out those differences. That is why on one of my slides, by the way, I send the presentation to the chat to everybody. So if you're interested, you can download it and use it, making references in the future. That is why we thought that telecollaboration really needs those different phases. And of course, you can do much in the pre-project phase, preparing students for some things and even alerting them to some things, things that they take for granted. We conduct a common double degree program with Germany, with University of Potsdam. And it assumes that students learn together from Lublin and Potsdam in groups, and the first semester they take a part in their institutions, and then they take 2 semesters in Potsdam and 2 semesters in Lublin. And we thought that it would be a good idea for them to take this first semester and get to know each other better and collaborate and you know, just socialize and stuff. And that was, of course, a great idea. But we didn't really think that the choice of communication tools is so culturally dependent that if Polish students instantly started with a Facebook group, which was something that was their first choice, that actually put German students, that made them reluctant to collaborate because they thought that Facebook is not secure enough, Facebook is not serious enough. And they started to look at the Polish students with some kind of, let's say, distanced attitude because of the tool. And once they switched to WhatsApp, once they started using WhatsApp, things started to develop well. So sometimes it's such apparently tiny things for us that actually turn out to block this kind of communication and collaboration. So I think that, just as I said, pre-project phase, preparing students, exploring, finding out much more about the practical reality, the English language teaching reality in the target place, I think would be actually crucial. And I think we too frequently jump into the project as quickly as we can because we have little time. And it's rarely the case that we take, for instance, the first semester for preparation and, you know, different kinds of stuff before the second semester with the exchange thing. So I think also looking at my experience right now, most probably I would try to expand this kind of pre-project phase much more.
Thank you very much. Thank you once again. It is great to have you for us, and thank you once again for accepting our invitation and your great talk.
Thank you so much, Jarek Hoca.
Thank you.